When Cyberpunk 2077 launched back in 2020, it was heartbreaking. After the immense hype of the supposedly game-changing open-world RPG CD Projekt Red was building, it was hard not to be dismayed at the apparent end product. The initial wave of positive reviews from PC users painted a promising picture of a rich and detailed sci-fi city, but for console gamers, it was a very different story. Let's just refresh our memories as to what the game looked like on consoles at launch. Playing the PlayStation 4 version of Cyberpunk 2077 on PlayStation 5 was not a good experience. The world looked flat and lifeless, main characters looked incredibly rough around the edges, and what few NPCs populated Night City looked as if they'd crawled out of a PlayStation 3 and wandered aimlessly up and down dull-looking streets. A wondrous metropolis this was not. There was still a lot to like and even a few things to love. Night City was brimming with potential and filled with fascinating stories and characters. Sadly, it was hard to enjoy those stories in a game riddled with near-constant crashes and irritating bugs. However, there was light at the end of this buggy tunnel. The substantial new-gen PS5 and Xbox Series XS version updates dropped in March 2022, and with that, it was time to head back to Night City. What a difference they made. Cyberpunk 2077 looks, runs, and plays better than ever before. Honestly, it feels like a whole new game. Seeing Night City for the first time as it looked in all those trailers, as many of those reviewing the game on high-end PCs back in 2020 saw it, was astounding. This was the sprawling sci-fi city we were promised, fizzing with colour and noise and life. I found myself simply walking slowly along the streets in between side gigs, taking in the preposterous adverts and drinking in the beauty of the garish neon lights illuminating the slick, rain-soaked pavement. That the game finally runs at a smooth 60 FPS also means I can go back to playing my character the way I wanted to, as a relentless Terminator type who rips off the front door and murders everybody with a shotgun. It's sublime. As great as improved resolutions, better textures, and smoother frame rates are, and they do make all the difference, they're nothing compared to the fact that Cyberpunk 2077 just works now. I appreciate that's a low bar, and certainly not one I'm giving CDPR a standing ovation for, but being able to wander around the city aimlessly taking missions on without the nagging fear that the game is about to crash is so freeing. It allows me to better enjoy what always worked about the game. Outstandingly written and deeply varied quests. That I can experience them in a properly stunning open world is a delicious bonus. Cyberpunk 2077 still isn't without its problems. While there are more NPCs and a more responsive police force, they still don't really behave in a believable way most of the time. A lot of the gear and loot still feels largely pointless too, and I've amassed a small fortune that I have no impetus to spend. But these are minor niggles compared to the problems I had with the game a year ago, and given CDPR's commitment to continuing to improve Cyberpunk 2077, I'm sure things can only get better. For the first time since 2020, I'm actively excited about Cyberpunk 2077. I'm slightly obsessed even, and that really does fill me with joy. Right, I'm gonna go play the game now.